I got to hit my record on my podcast equipment. Welcome, everybody, to the Cost of Doing Nothing podcast. I'm Alan Wiederhold. And as you know, I have had some really interesting, some really amazing guests on the show over the last year. And a lot of what I like to talk about is just that reflection of where I've been in this year. And it's really good timing because today, as I kind of look back at my Google Photos, that loves to remind me where I was. 4 years ago, I did a 100-mile ultra marathon. Now, there's a lot of funny things about that run. So, about 2 years before that, I attempted to do the Zion 100. For whatever reason, living in Maryland, I cannot process altitude to save my life. I just can't. Like, I'm at sea level, and I went out with a couple of friends. They finished. I did not. And there are actually pictures, I think, from that time where they were trying to figure out who was going to gut the body and drag it out because I was dragging them down. It was funny. So they were so amazingly gracious. They stayed with me until I finally just said go. And I remember going up this mesa and throwing up the entire way. Like, I mean, just people were like, "Hey, are you okay?" I'm like, "No, not, but gonna go." So I ended up in the medical tent around mile 38. And then there was like this torrential downpour, and I thought Noah and the ark were going to flow by, and they eventually canceled the race. But my friends actually got to, I think it was like right around mile 90 something they finished. And I was just so amazed by that. But we had trained like crazy. Like, I mean, my mileage is like 70 miles a week. I'd run 50s on Saturdays and 20s on Sundays. I mean, it was just insane. So I was always tired. And being 50, I kind of thought that was like, well, maybe I'm overtraining. I don't know. That kind of mileage is nuts. So I have with me today Dr. Catherine Divingian. So we call Dr. D. And I'm amazed and great to have this conversation because you and I have been kind of trading some messages over the last couple of weeks. And I've been following you on Instagram for a while. And I think this is really good timing, especially on the anniversary of this run. So I was looking at this video my wife showed me this morning about this run, and I think I was at like mile 58. My head's in the game, and I'm like, I'm there. And I said, she asked me, she's like, "What do you need? Do you need anything else? What do you want to tell everybody?" And I said, "Go to sleep. Everyone go to sleep." So I was just dialed in. And when I looked at my eyes and the focus that I had, it was awesome. But then when you step away from ultra running and you kind of go back to the day-to-day stuff. So I've left Ironmans, I've left ultra running, and now I'm a normal human being, 54 years old, and I'm exhausted all the time. In fact, there was a point I was walking into my office, I fell asleep. And my partner, a very good friend of mine, he walks in and he's like, "Bro, go home." And it was a problem. Do you see this very often with men? And before we get into that, Dr. D or Catherine, or do I call you Dr. Divingian? What do you want me to call you?
I go by my street name, Dr. D, so
Love
that's
it.
fine.
Absolutely love it. I was hoping you were going to say that.
Love
So
it.
sweet. So credit. So tell me a little bit about you and tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in the Navy back in the day, in the early 2000s, began to work with a lot of men in the Navy. And I realized that I had a real passion for men's health and to helping them. I began to see the phenomenon you're describing is incredibly common. I see so many men who are experiencing the low energy, just experiencing the mood swings, the brain fog, just gaining weight and losing muscle. And when they look in the mirror, they're just not the man that they used to be. Their
Huh.
sexual health, their libidos in the tank, they're having erectile dysfunction for the first time in their lives, and they feel as if their bodies are betraying them.
So
And I
let's talk
started
about
seeing
that
this.
for a second. And I want to caveat the show because my shows are always so amazing because I go from spiritual psychedelic to where is God moving to men's health because the I live by a code really is body being balanced business. So all of these things are really they're so interconnected. So, ED, immediately when you say the word or the initials ED, what is a typical response for a man?
The typical response is just complete shame, complete embarrassment, do not want to admit it. It
Yeah.
is such a it's something that really hits men at their self-concept,
The
just their
ego.
sense of being a man. Exact
Yeah.
ego, being a
I was in
man.
the Navy as well. And I remember in the Persian Gulf, like we would put condoms on the gangway just out the quarter deck. And as we're getting off, they were all the same size condoms. And we would always put small, medium, large, and all the larges were always taken. And it's kind of this man ego thing that we're just taught, like, the libido is like, it's like everything. And just having this conversation, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of laughs, some giggles, some, oh God, not me, man, not my problem. I'm going to look around and yeah. So this is a big serious thing.
It truly is. I mean, the concept of a man as a man is so critical. And I don't give a damn what is happening with society. Society is trying to take a man's self-concept and shame y'all for wanting to be men. But the physiology and what God endowed you with is that sense that you need to be this very virile, very strong and powerful. And anything that really hammers that is painful, incredibly painful.
So talk to me about that, and I'll just be 100% candid with my audience. I think when I started the show, my third episode was with my concierge doc, and I very, very lightly skirted the issue. I will remind the folks on this call and on this show of a little bit about my history. So we talk very openly about my past, about being sexually abused and being bullied and not being able to grow facial hair and all of those things in high school. That the formidable years is what I would call them. But then as I got older, got into ultra running, got into all of this healthy lifestyle, I started to see this big decline that you're talking about, like falling asleep at work. I always felt like I had brain fog, like I just wasn't 100% alert. And I went to my doctor, who is a really great friend. Now, being in healthcare like we both are, I'm on the insurance finance side, been in it for 30 years. The average time spent with a doctor is less than 6.5 minutes. Fortunately, I have a great doctor friend who I can go to, not an endocrinologist. So he and I sat down and I'm kind of explaining what's going on. I was like, sounds like you have low T, bro. I didn't even know what it was. Like, I was just like, okay, so what is that? He's like, just like, and we'll talk about what that is. But I went and got my testosterone tested. And just before we get there, talk to me about what is testosterone? Like, I kind of know what it is, and I'm hearing a lot more about it. But for the people who are listening, what is it? Like, how does it work?
Right. So testosterone is a hormone that's present in both men and women. Now, men have many, many times more concentration, higher levels naturally than women. But it is a hormone that's been shown to be associated with muscle mass, with getting lean, and with energy and drive and focus. So the things that we tend to think of as the alpha male is what is associated with testosterone.
Hmm.
Also causes the secondary characteristics, like you said, the facial hair and the libido, the sexual behaviors, and being able to maintain and sustain good erections.
Does it also link to other things? I mean, like osteoporosis. Because if I have lean muscle mass, I would think that that would ultimately kind of move into like bone health and other things like that.
Exactly. So men who are low in testosterone actually get higher fractures.
Hmm.
They have thinner bones, and they also have more heart disease.
Wow. So I go to my doctor, kind of recapping this conversation, and we do a blood test. And I come back and my testosterone is 240. What should it be? Just out of curiosity.
And this is what's really interesting is that over the past 40 years, we've seen a decline in what was normal for men back in the day to now. and they say, oh, well, low mid 250s or so is supposed to be normal. And they've actually dialed down the recommendations of what is supposed to be normal. And
So
that's
what so
one of the
what
reasons.
yeah,
Yeah.
so what was it? Because when I started going through this process, I heard like the high was 1600, the average was 800, and today, like you're saying, I mean, normal is like 250, 800 is like high. Like, I mean, is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. There were, in fact, generations back, like you said, the average being 800, that was normal for men.
So if it's 800, I have energy. I probably need a little bit more muscle mass because I'm working in the field or I'm working a manufacturing job. I'm a young man going off to war. I mean, I can see that. So why would it be so low today? Like, I mean, and this is a very frank conversation because I think this is one that needs to be addressed.
Yes. Well, we have so many things that really disrupt testosterone and the making of testosterone. For one thing, more obesity, and the heavier, the more fat you have, the easier it is to convert your testosterone literally to estrogen, which is the feminizing
Hmm.
hormone. And then that just makes you look even worse and feel even worse, and your body composition then is not where it should be. Also, there are lots of plastics that's been shown to cause more of the estrogenic effects. Soy prevalent in foods. A lot of these foods are attacking our system. A lot of the environmental insults that we're experiencing, the pesticides and so on, are actually causing a lot of these issues.
Wow. So I was actually in a meeting yesterday and we were talking about plastics. And it was actually kind of funny because I was drinking out of a plastic bottle and I was talking about plastics. And someone said to me, do you know that we actually, the average American, consumes one credit card worth of plastic a week?
That
That's
is amazing.
crazy.
That is amazing.
So,
And that does hit your testosterone.
yeah.
That definitely impacts it.
So if I'm overweight, which we know 65% of Americans are either overweight or obese, like morbidly obese, and I'm eating a credit card a week, this is obviously going to have some kind of an impact on whether I can get it up or not.
Yes. Oh, it has a direct impact. In fact, 70% of men with low testosterone have ED.
So, okay, now this is going to be the fun part of the conversation because you and I had this conversation a couple of days ago, and I was very open with you. And you were like, "Wow." So, all right, so I went to my doctor friend. 240 was my testosterone level, and he goes, "Oh my god, dude, you got low T. Here, I'm going to throw you some Viagra." Well, I am not able to have a sexual relationship with my wife. We tried. Like, I mean, I love this woman to death, but we were in bed. It would get soft. I mean, it was just like, it was like trying to fold it sideways. I mean, anything you can do. And it would just stop. And that gets to be really embarrassing after a while, but you don't talk about it. I almost equate it to like women who've had a mammography who feel less like a woman. So I've got this thing psychologically going on. I've got this thing going on biologically and physically. I can't talk about it. So my doctor sends me to another doctor friend, and the doctor friend says, let's talk about your lifestyle. Okay, you're a runner, you eat healthy, you do all this other stuff. You're very active, very slim. So it's not an obesity thing. And sends me to a lab and I pay another deductible. I pay another copay for the office visit. And I go back and he's like, dude, sorry, you're 52. I think it was 52 at the time. You had a good run. Here's some Cialis. And like, seriously? So then I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I want to go on testosterone replacement. I hear all this stuff. I've talked to other people. Go back to him. He sends me to another doctor. Doctor, now it's a female doctor, exact same scenario. Like now I am a year into this. I'm secretly popping Viagra's in the bathroom or in my closet, hoping that tonight's gonna be the night. And then I fall asleep. So now I'm asleep with a heart on, and I'm still not able to have sex. 2 years this goes on. And then I'm at a Warrior Council event and Dr. Boyd, my concierge doc, was there, and I was explaining the situation, and he's like, "Bro, like that's an easy fix." So he's like, "Let's take care of that. I want you to call me." But what he did, and this is kind of where I want to go with this, testosterone affects every part of your life in all four domains. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
So, what do you tell someone when someone like myself who, I'm on the top of my game in business, my body, spirituality, I'm getting there, but how are they all connected? Like, you know,
Right. So the body is the most obvious and certainly what we've started to unpack in our discussion right now. The being, your essence, the way your self-concept, and even it's even a blockage to the way that you can interact with God. Because when you feel betrayed and you feel like you're not firing on all eight, you're just not connecting to the creator like you really could. Your balance, you talked about your marriage, the difficulty with being able to have that relationship with your wife who you otherwise adore and you really want that connection, but you can't have that connection. And
yeah,
then your business.
it was funny because like when I actually finally like got to a point where I told her like that this was all going on, she thought it was her. Like she just thought I wasn't like attracted to her anymore.
And that's exactly something else that I discussed too, is that I thought about why do women have one of several responses? One is either, honey, that's okay, and try to play it off, and they're still frustrated. The other one is getting angry, mad, irritated, frustrated, and showing that visibly. But the only reason why these women, or the primary reason why these women are feeling this way is and reacting this way is because they feel like less of a woman. It's like I try to look beautiful for you. I try to be, loving to you. I try to stay in shape so that you could be proud of me. And why can't I turn you on anymore?
Mm, yeah.
So it
So
that
that
then just damages that part of the balance. And then of course business, if you don't have the energy to go through your day, if you got the brain fog, if your moods are going up and down, and I've heard this from men who do really, really large business deals. They say, I'm just not mentally there. I used to be able to dominate in the boardroom, and now I'm just not that alpha anymore.
Yeah, and I used to feel like that without even realizing that I felt like that because you'd walk into a room and there's like this confidence about you. And I actually was talking to somebody, even the show, like when you look back a year and you watch my video footage to where it is today, completely different. So dealing with imposter syndrome, dealing with all these other things now, I joke because I've been on testosterone almost been over a little bit over a year. So I've gained 11 pounds of muscle mass. I'm doing more strength training. I'm actually going to run another 100-mile next year, the one that I died at. So, yeah, it makes you think completely different without even realizing this is actually a problem.
Absolutely. So once you can connect the dots and realize that testosterone is such a heavy driver of so many, like you said, all four domains, it just goes across every one of those. And if you are in the tank with testosterone, it's going to wreck everything. It's a domino effect. The body starts and then everything else just falls.
So you're very knowledgeable, very passionate. You've also, we're going to kind of switch a little bit of gears here. You've had some shifts in this last couple weeks. So you and I met. I was following you on Instagram. You are very much an alpha female. Your message was kind of directed to those people, and then I had a conversation with you. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I do like being absolutely direct, and this is why I work with men is because I like being able to just say it as it is. And what you noticed was my approach was so alpha coming after an alpha, and you said that's just never going to play. And that is absolutely right. I took that feedback and I'm very grateful for that because what I realized was yes, I know about men experiencing the shame and the guilt of low testosterone and ED, and I really wanted to connect more with that. I want to be a doctor that men can feel like you're in a place where you can talk openly with me and that you will not be attacked. So even though I'm direct and I want to be able to tell the truth, live by the code, at the same time, I want you to realize that this is a place where you can be safe when you work with me.
And that's what I love about talking to you is that you have I love the direct approach, but you also have the ability to hold space, which is something that I think is missing in a lot of doctors. So I have a lot of doctor friends. I've helped build practices, and there is a do what I say, not what I do. There's always that kind of approach of you look at them and they're like they're either not healthy at all themselves or smoking, their lifestyle sucks. The thing about doctors I've always found really funny is that they're really good caregivers. They're horrible caretakers. Like they do not take care of themselves at all, and they don't do anything that they would recommend to a patient. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I'm still serving in the military. I'm a reservist in the Army. So I have to really step it up and lead from the front. I'm with a field hospital. So it's very rough and ready. And
Wow,
so
tell
I
me
have
about
to
that.
lead from the
That's
front.
awesome. So you went from the Navy. So how long were you in the Navy?
Oh, I just had a couple year tour. I ended up just broken, physically broken, and I got out after a couple years, rebuilt myself up from
Huh.
wheelchair. This is quite the story. I was using a wheelchair because the corpsmen felt sorry for me because they saw me just so broken. I had to rebuild that up, walk again with a cane. One day I had the idea, I'm going to just throw this damn cane away, and then I just kept working and working. I had a shoebox full of pain pills that I was taking. I had to get rid of those one pill at a time. So I was addicted to opioids back in the day when I
Hmm.
got out. I was just such a wreck. I had a vision that I wanted to compete in bodybuilding. So in 2011 and 2012, I took the stage. Took a while, took about a decade to rebuild, almost a decade, and I stepped back on stage.
Wow. So I did not know any of this is amazing. So for 2 years you were in the Navy. So when you say broken, like what do you mean by that? Because I'm thinking wheelchair. I'm thinking I was in the Navy for 12 years. And it's actually kind of cool. I have my dad's boot camp ring from the Navy, and I have mine, but I prefer to wear his. But for anybody who's been in the military, I have like the utmost respect because we know we all serve the same mud. We've all gone through a lot of the same stuff. But when you say broken, like what do you mean by that?
So I had so many injuries that I incurred throughout the working in the Navy. I was a medical physicist and out in the field and so on, and it just ended up breaking me down. I just was
Huh.
not physically prepared to be able to take on those types of tasks. So I just got to the point where I couldn't function, and I essentially got kicked out.
Hmm. So was
Essentially
it
got
a
kicked.
medical discharge?
Yep. And so 20 years later, after rebuilding and working on and focusing, literally almost 20 years later, at the age of 51, I went back into the military in the Army as a physician.
So now how did that happen? Because I got off active duty after 4 years, and I spent most of my time at sea. I mean, I literally went from boot camp to the the Persian Gulf crisis to the Adriatic crisis when Yugoslavia was breaking up into Bosnia and everything else. So I spent my 3 years, 3.5, almost 4 years at sea. I mean, I came in to Norfolk and Charleston, South Carolina, very periodically, but then I went back in the reserves only because I felt like I was missing something. I missed the camaraderie. I missed the rank and file. I don't know what it was. So I met my wife in college. We're college sweethearts, and I kept saying, "Hey, can I go back?" she'd say no. And then I said, "Can I go back?" And she'd say no. And I said, "Can I go back?" And she'd say no. Things normally work with threes with me. I don't know why that is. But I finally, like I said, "Can I go back?" And she's like, "Whatever." So I took whatever as I could go back. And she was like, "That's not what I meant." She allowed me to do it for 8 years. And I was in the construction battalion. I was with Seabees. So got to do a lot of the same stuff that the Marines and the Army were doing, like really cool stuff. But how? Like, so you go from broken wheelchair, cane to fitness, standing on a stage to the Army?
That's right.
Like,
That's
what's the thought process there?
So when I was 13, I fell in love with MASH, and I wanted to be a doctor in field hospital.
Okay.
And sure enough, that's what I ended up in. That was actually my assignment out of residency, was
Oh
the
my
field
gosh, that's so
hospital.
cool.
I mean, it's just amazing the way that God works and put me into that. But as you can imagine, it requires a great deal of energy and stamina. In fact, our last drill, we were putting up the whole hospital, the tent hospital, laying down all the wiring and putting in all the water systems and driving the big trucks and everything. It's just a phenomenal experience. Most doctors just don't get experiences like that.
That's so cool because I remember that was part of my job with CVs is that I was just for anybody who's listening, when you hear the Marines, no disrespect to the Marines, they are the lower half of the Navy. When they're coming off the C-130s and they've got their guns in their hands, the CBs have already been there for like 30 days, establishing the perimeter and the camp and everything that goes with it. So it's kind of the same thing because I remember our entire role was to create these roll-on, roll-off floating barges, get the stuff off of the ships to establish this camp, drive big Humvees, and create the roads and everything else. So doctors don't do that kind of stuff.
We do in the Army. We've learned how to do all the systems. So we'll do everything, including digging latrines. And I'm talking even full bird colonels doing this.
That's so cool. Now, I did not know that. So everybody pitches in on that.
We all pitch in, we all learn how to lay the groundwork because everybody, it's all hands on deck whenever we set up a new hospital system.
So now you and I were trading messages last night, and you're still in the ER, like you're working the emergency room, correct?
Yes, indeed.
So what is that like? I mean, what we talk a lot about our broken healthcare system, and there are so many reasons for that. But I mean, what's it like working in an ER? Is there a lot of trauma? Is there like the things that we see on TV?
Well, I work in a rural ER,
Okay.
so we're very rustic in what we have as far as our capabilities, but it certainly does become a big rush of people many, many times. So it can get to the point where if we have a school bus accident like we had about a month ago, that now becomes a disaster response
Hmm.
because anything that overwhelms a system by definition is considered to be a disaster.
Wow.
So, yeah, even if it's minor accident, when you have a lot of patients coming in, so easy to overwhelm these little systems. And as you're such an expert on healthcare systems, you realize that there is so much fraud, waste, and abuse that goes along with that. Unfortunately, the ER is the receptacle where we take everybody, people who don't see their primary care doctors. They could be super, super sick. We take traumas. We take people who are coming in just because they don't feel good. They got the sniffles. And one of the biggest issues is that the bills don't get paid. So, yes, you can write off the bad debt as part of business practices, but the system is getting super overwhelmed
Yeah.
with that.
So that's kind of a random conversation. I wrote a book called "Cheated: How Healthcare Stole the American Dream," and only you can take it back because it's really waste, fraud all the way around. I mean, there's a lot of blame to all of it. So I had a client that was down in Houston, Texas, and the hospital that they actually would go to charged 1,800% more than what they would charge Medicare. So here, the CEO's wife is getting ready to have a surgery. We get a bill or a pre-estimate of what the benefits were going to be. It was $124,000 procedure, and the CEO of the hospital calls the CEO of my doctor's practice and says, "Hey, if you just give me your credit card for 14 grand, we'll call it a day." 14 grand. So, but they wanted to charge the insurance company, which the group was self-funded. They were the insurance company. So it's crazy to me that hospitals charge a lot of what they charge, and the only people who really get squeezed in the middle of all of this is the patient. So
Definitely, it does get to that point, and then, of course, the pharmaceutical industry, with the ability to control access to
yeah.
medications, we have shortages all the time, for example, national shortages of very, very critical drugs, so then that we have to be very crafty and alternative for our practices.
So, I mean, that's a really good segue because we're talking a lot right now about like Ozempics and these weight loss things. And I think people are looking for that as a kind of a quick fix. And as I think about that, I literally, as we're talking, I'm thinking about this. How does like Ozempics and these kind of weight loss things, how do they affect your ED and your low testosterone? Does it have any impact on whether your testosterone goes up or down?
Absolutely. So these really are phenomenal weight loss medications. There's a real reason why people love them so much. People are losing a lot of weight. So by losing weight again, that really helps boost up testosterone. Now, the secret is to optimize the rest of your life, the clean eating and the exercise as well, so then you get more of a synergistic effect. So yeah, you could be sloppy and continue to eat bonbons and Cheetos, but the effect will be much, much less on your testosterone because there are a lot more impacts besides just losing weight.
Yeah, because as we're talking about these four domains of body, being, balance, and business, to me, Ozempic is just working on the body to some degree, because I would even argue that as soon as you go off Ozempic, you're going to put the weight back on for a couple of reasons. One, your mindset's not there. And if you're still eating bonbons and Cheetos, you're eventually just going to balloon back up to the fat ass you were before you started it anyway. So I think there has to be some thought process, and I think we used to see that a lot with like gastric bypasses and lap bands. People would lose all this weight, but their mindset was still do whatever I wanted to do. They would end up getting sick, or it just didn't work. Are we? You think we're going to kind of see the same kind of a thought process with Ozempic and other drugs like that?
Absolutely. And that's why a lot of gastric bypass patients I've seen have actually gone through the counseling. They're making sure that they're starting to dial in the nutrition and that they have the mindset and that they're really ready to be able to sustain that. Otherwise, you're going to reverse all the effects of that surgery, that very difficult surgical procedure and having to cope with that. So the same thing with the Ozempic. If you haven't really dialed in, and the same thing, whenever I do my therapies for testosterone, I make sure that I include the entire life cycle and the lifestyle and ensure that the men are really dialed in.
So what does that look like? So I'm talking to Dr. D. I have low testosterone. I'm 240, 250, 260, E400. I mean, let's just call it what it is. And I have a consultation with you. What does that look like? Like what are my steps?
Right. So I want to, first of all, find out how it's impacting your life in every one of those domains. Because once you realize that it is so all encompassing, now you've got leverage on yourself. And that's the most critical thing is that you know that you really want to do this. Once you have that and you realize where you want to be, so we go pit to peak, so we know what the possibilities are for you, that's where we start to talk about how do you get there. That's when we cross the gap.
Do you think a lot of the patients that you're talking to even think about what the possibilities are, or are they so trapped in the where I'm at right now? I'm just kind of thinking, Man, for a couple of years, it was such a dark period of like popping these blue pills and just hoping beyond hope and then falling asleep. And I'm like, oh, again, like I fell asleep again. So, I mean, can anyone really think about the possibilities?
Yes, because one of the good things is that the whole thing about testosterone is now becoming a conversation that's much more popular. So they might see their buddies starting to have this resurgence, looking fantastic and feeling fantastic, and they're thinking maybe this can happen to me. So very often it's a word of mouth type of thing. Now, if they haven't been exposed to that message, absolutely, it's something that we need to say, hey, this is a possibility. What would that look like for you? But a lot of guys are now starting to see the possibility thanks to the media really bringing it up.
So, not every guy wants to be six pack abs. I don't know what guy wouldn't, but I think there was a point of time we celebrated the dad bod, and I never understood that because like I'm just too vain. But I don't think that every guy wants to be 210% body fat. I think some of it maybe that's just either they haven't dreamt or we just in our society we don't really think like that anymore. We don't talk like that. But what if the guy just wants to be just an average guy who's fit and just wants to chase his kids around? I mean, is testosterone that's still a reality, a possibility for them?
Yeah, that is definitely a reality for them, and whatever level it is that they want to achieve, it's certainly achievable. We've seen people do tremendous transformations, yourself included, and we've seen people who have just taken a step forward and just feel better, and then just the basic lifestyle has improved. So you don't have to want to have the six pack abs, but one other thing I do like to think about is why not open up your mind and to
Mm,
consider this? Why not think about the possible? A lot of times I feel as if society says you shouldn't be thinking about this. You're 50, whatever. I got six pack abs and I'm 55. So I like to say, hey, why can't you think about this? Why can't you turn a lot of the concepts that society has on their head and think about something different?
mm.
This could be you if you want.
I think society it places so much emphasis on self-care is good mentally. Oh, we should be meditating, we should everything else, but we don't focus on the reality of the physical side of my I have a gym in my house. So my wife and I, she's actually working out right now. Fitness is just that's part of our lifestyle. But it would be super easy having a 7 and 9 year old to make every excuse under the sun on why we can't work out. I get up at 4 o'clock. I have my whole day, but I mean, is this one of the things that you would hear as an objection? Is I just don't have time.
Right. And this was something that during one of the council meetings, I was challenged on myself. And I said that I need to work on time management. And I was challenged to consider this, and I love this. It's not time management, it's self management. So when you take the responsibility for how the time goes, and you really have that powerful enough reason, then you will get rid of the excuses. When you live by the code, you attack those excuses and you realize it all goes back to self management.
It's almost the ability to look at the man in the mirror and hold yourself responsible for what it is that you see.
Absolutely. 100% needing to take 100% accountability. You know, Jocko wrote the book about extreme ownership.
Mm.
And that is just the title alone tells you the power of being able to do that as a leader and then the self leadership.
Yeah, because again, kind of going back to the very beginning of the conversation, I saw in my frame, in my just even in my mental state running 4 years ago, this 100, it wasn't a question of whether I was going to get it done or not. The question was just go to sleep. That was the statement. And I'm going to press on and get this thing done. The backside of that, which was really Which is really funny is a combination of a lot of errors. So I finished in, I think the cutoff was 29 hours. I finished in 27 straight hours, 27 straight. It was 102 miles. I got lost. My headlamp died. I used my phone as a light. Um, I talk about psychedelics and having the psychedelic experiences. Running for 24 straight hours will give you the same experiences. I'm just not gonna lie. I saw blue bunnies with red eyes, and yeah, it was crazy. But there's a frame, there's a thought process that goes through the ownership of I'm going to accept responsibility. I'm not going to accept responsibility because 2 years ago when I ran Zion 100, I didn't know why I was running. I was done. I told myself in the beginning that we're just going to see how it goes, and I had a call with Garrett the day before the run. He's like, "Are you ready?" I'm like, "No, not ready." I was, but mentally, I had already just decided that I was done with running. I forgot why. I forgot the joy. So mentally, couldn't finish the race. I died at mile 38 again. Same medical tent, same place. I probably could have continued, but I didn't have that accountability that you're talking about in myself.
Yeah, that is so critical. I wanted to do a ruck marathon, and for week after week after week, I was stuck at 20 miles.
Mm.
I could not mentally pass that 20-mile barrier, so I'd quit at 20 miles. Why I couldn't push just a little bit further was just I wasn't ready. And then one day, a couple years ago, I was finally able to pass that.
So mentally, I'm talking to Dr. D. I'm like, my testosterone's in the shit. I'm now coming to terms with, hey, this is going to affect all of the things in my life. I've got some work to do. Maybe I'm healthy and have low testosterone. Maybe I'm not, but I've got a couple of things I got to do. Have a conversation with you. What does the conversation look like, and then what are the next steps? Like, what can a person who should be having a conversation? How do I start that conversation first?
Right. So we will find out what your goals are. And some men want to continue to have a family. So that informs what sort of therapies I'll be choosing. Because I do have quite a few. I do a lot more than just testosterone replacement.
Huh,
I have
okay.
ergogenics and I have supplements. I have a lot of different things that I have in my arsenal. I also have lifestyle optimization that is so simple that even busy businessmen can implement and really help boost their testosterone. So I'll find out what the goals are. I'll find out what the barriers are, and then kind of marry all these together in a comprehensive solution. But like I said, it's super simple. All the medicines, supplements, and lifestyle changes you need just simply put together so that you can implement it. Everything that you like to do, all the foods you like, and then
Hmm.
what sort of time constraints do you have. Put that together, a comprehensive plan, package it up, send it right to you.
Wow. So I guess I was just thinking like this was just some kind of a quick fix. I just take a shot twice a week and I'm done. It sounds like there's a little bit more to it, and there's a different approach for everybody.
Right, exactly. Because there are the TRT clinics that you could just go to, wham bam, thank you, ma'am, and we're done. But these men are not optimized. They're still not experiencing what they need. And not only that, I also want to show my patients that I care. I
Mm,
want to not be that doctor that's the 6 minutes and you're done, because this needs some time. We need to unpack what has happened to you, the damage that has occurred from the shame and the guilt, and really work on that. Because, yeah, you
so
can sweep it under the carpet, but that just hasn't addressed everything that's built up.
wow. So again, I'm kind of thinking of every direct to consumer marketing. Hey, just send me, your blood sample. I'll send you some testosterone. But we're really not dealing with all of the issues.
Exactly. I really and truly stand against that. I mean, if somebody wants a quick fix, that would be the type of person who would not be my ideal client.
Okay.
I really want to be able to get to know each person and what his goals are so that I can have everything dialed in for his lifestyle and his goals.
So we've got this all dialed in, and is it blood draws? Is it quarterly? Is it once a year? Like how do we measure whether my life is working or not?
Right. So it is blood draws and it's regular every 2 to 3 months because I want to keep on top of what's happening. Now, I work at different levels. So there are men who just want to address the testosterone. And what I'm doing in this clinic that I'm planning on starting in Tallahassee is I found equipment where you could actually get the blood taken in the office, turn it around within a few minutes, know your testosterone levels, and we can immediately get you something all squared away. You get your medicine, your supplements, and your whole plan squared away immediately.
Huh.
So that's the faster and yet still very thorough. And then that could be regular follow-ups. And then there are much more robust options
So
too.
now everything, I guess I always thought is I had to go to a lab somewhere and get it drawn. And then I had to wait like 48 hours or so you're able to do it and turn it around right away.
Exactly. So we're going to be getting that equipment in the office when that opens up so that we can have immediate results, at least for testosterone and
Hmm.
several other markers. Now, more comprehensive, if you want to find out what's going on with all your lipids and so on, that would be the more comprehensive type of approach that would require the blood draw and then addressing several other factors.
So how much of this does genetics play a role? So, and again, because men aren't having this conversation with other men, and the reason I ask is that I I'm been talking to my mom, and I found out that I have a mutated gene variant called HFE. It's a liver genetic variant. I lost my grandfather when my grandfather was 66. I've lost two other uncles, and I have another uncle right now who his liver is shutting down. So my mom's brothers, this is all transferred from father to sons. I have the same variant. So I just found out a couple of months ago, but how much of this genetics part plays a role in testosterone, either male or female? Does any part of this?
Oh, absolutely. There is something that would bear on testosterone, especially with that mutation that you talked about. Now, back in 1990, I started studying actually molecular biology and genetics, and I did some early research and some of the techniques 90 to
Hmm.
93 and started establishing some of the early techniques in labs. And what we started looking at was not just genetics, but epigenetics. In other words, how lifestyle can change how your genetics are unpacked and expressed. So, in other words, you might have the gene, but you can find ways to suppress it from actually showing up in some
Right.
cases.
Which is what I'm
So,
finding too in the psychedelic therapy work that I that I'm doing. And I laugh about that because I'd never a bazillion years would have thought I'd have gone down that road, being a healthcare expert. Um, I find that we're all born with a blueprint, DNA blueprint, but along life's way, we get these imprints. And that's what we call them in trauma facilitation. There's an imprint of whether that be trauma, whether that be life events that alter things in the blueprint itself that we can. So for me, how I process iron is different. So I have to think about that a little bit. So it keeps everything from that. But I've also seen other things that you can have an impact on those variants as well. So with testosterone, I mean, are there things that I can do to check if you were taking my blood? Are you able to check my gene? And because if no one's having this conversation, and this is why I think I'm asking the question is nobody in my family ever thought about an HFE gene. I've lost almost four relatives who are very important to me, very important in my life. No one's ever had the conversation. How many are not having the conversation around genetics and testosterone, where it could be something that and I talk about legacy. Surprise, I gave you a gift. It could be low T. So Is there a way to check for that? And I mean, and is that a way to open up a conversation?
Absolutely. Personalized medicine is becoming more and more important. So if you suspect that there is a gene that has a mutation that could be really detrimental, it's really worth looking into. And there are some great genetic tests out there to be able to
Huh.
figure out what might be happening.
Okay, interesting. So, yeah, I was just kind of thinking about that as we were talking about this because I know that testosterone usually time when you're about 30, things are great, and then right around 30 they start falling off. So, and is it more falling off? I mean, is it noticeable? I'm trying to think back when I was 30. Uh, I don't think I had the problem until I was like in my 50, probably late 40s, 50. If I were to think back and graph it, it's probably late 40s. But I mean, is that typical? I mean, when do I start really noticing, the difference of my testosterone?
Right. Now we're talking as Gen Xers. So we've had the experience of being able to be at the higher testosterone levels just because of all the different environmental
Ah,
impacts and lifestyle impacts that we talked about from the 80s and 90s. As we started seeing more of these issues, we're kind of starting to experience that at a sharper decline than we normally would have at in our 50s. But millennials are getting hit early. So I'm seeing a lot of younger men who are 25, 35 that are abysmally low, and it is shocking to me.
wow. Because I've heard that. Never really talked about that, but really. So when you hear the expression, we're literally beatifying men, would you agree that that's really what we're doing?
Unfortunately, yes. It
Medically,
is,
physically, biologically speaking.
yes, and psychologically.
Yeah,
Psychologically, because trying to beat down men for being men does not help men to be able to have, even starting from the mindset
right.
that's
Which,
beat
it's
down.
as you're talking about that, I'm thinking I have friends who are pastors of churches, and I've had these conversations with them about what the biggest problem in the church is. And really, it's a lack of leadership from men in their homes from a spirituality foundational level. I even think back, even 2 years ago, God was really not a part of my life. I was driving down a road where we were building our new house, and there's a big church. And I look over, and God's like, "Go in." I'm like, "No." God's like, "Go in." Again, three times. Third time, I go in. And I say to my kids in the back seat, my Rachel's running a half marathon in Florida, and I said, "Hey, we're going to church tomorrow." And they're like, "Where?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know, right?" Like, but now God is such a gigantic part of our lives. I remember like when I was going and we went every week, and Rachel had asked me the first time, what'd you guys do this week? I'm like, we went to church. She's kind of like, where? And I'm like, yeah, I know, right? So I brought her the next week, and we just kept going. And then there was a point in time where there was a question about recommitting your life. So, and I raised my hand. And I grew up in a very toxic Christian home. My mom and dad were amazing, but that God in the 80s and 90s, and we talk about this one on my show with Pastor Brad, and that God was like everything you did was a sin, like everything, like that. He put his thumb, and you couldn't do so. You, as a Gen Xer, you usually ran if you didn't have any kind of an establishment. And I remember raising my hand, and Rachel asking me on the way home, anything you want to talk about? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what coming home means. I don't know why I raised my hand. And then I had this hunger. Like I wanted to know more. I wanted to be more. Now I went to Bible college. I have all this knowledge in my head, but nothing ever really in my heart. So then Rachel, a couple months later, raises her hand, and we're like driving down the road. I'm like, hey, you raised your hand. And then you want to talk about it? And she's like, I don't know. But I got home, and I prayed with her in our driveway for the very first time. Now, men are not leading homes, whether that be because of testosterone, whether that be spirituality. They're either sucked into business and everything else falls apart, or they're into body and everything else falls apart. But again, kind of going circle back to everything. it's all of the domains together working in alignment, and that's what you're focusing on.
Absolutely. And by the way, I do work in the chaplaincy in the Army too. So I'm seeing this phenomenon a lot among the spiritual leadership in the homes. And the Bible is very clear about the men's spiritual leadership. And as you said, when the domains are not being topped out and focused on and maximized, you can definitely see that even as an implication of the spiritual leadership. So yes, there can be a, more of a hormonal drive. So I've noticed that higher testosterone. This is a fascinating study I found. Higher testosterone men are more likely to have integrity.
Hmm.
And so I just thought, this is amazing. If you're high T, you'll live by the code. You'll be that type of leader from the front. They actually showed that men who are lower T will tend to cheat when they're not noticed. Their
Huh.
integrity tends to slip. And so I thought, man, this is
Shortcuts.
fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, you can start with a shortcut, and then I mean, it's just cheating. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but yeah. Wow, that's
Right,
really interesting.
right.
All right,
So not
so
everything goes by T, but just those domains like we're talking.
yeah. So what's next for you? Because we've been again trading some conversations. You did a complete shift from what you were doing online to what's next. I mean, you kind of alluded to it. You're talking about a clinic in Tallahassee. So, like, talk to me about that.
Absolutely. So I'm really looking forward to bringing a very powerful testosterone therapy at the same time being able to address the whole man and the warrior's way, living in the warrior's way
Hmm.
as part of the conversation of this. Also being able to help. I'm planning on getting a warehouse gym too, so that these men who feel like they're stuck in certain domains in body can get that power back again and just get the youthfulness again. Just feel alpha, feel like you can move again, and feel like you've got that strength back again. So focusing on the body and then going to the other domains.
So let me make sure I understand this because this is I've not typically heard this. So you're talking about having a clinic, like an actual medical clinic, that's combined with a functional gym? Like,
Correct, correct. My partner is one of the top trainers I've ever seen who can blast people past any sort of sticking points. So we're partnering up and
wow.
bringing just sort of this, helping men to reclaim that that sense of feeling self-confidence again, reclaim that self-confidence.
That's almost unheard of. I'm just trying to think of, do I know of any like CrossFit boxes you go and you do CrossFit, but you're not tied to any functional medicine? I don't know of any clinic that is actually combining any kind of functional fitness to the other side, and especially with the coaching program around what we have learned living by the code and our fact map process. I mean, this is like completely a revolutionary idea.
I'm really excited about it because I'm so passionate. I feel called to be able to help men rise back up and just remember who they were and to
Hmm.
be able to come back even stronger than ever.
So, Dr. D, thank you so much for this conversation. It was a lot of fun. And to my listeners, this is a very sensitive subject. We talk about this. We talked about this at the very beginning. How immediately when you think about low T and erectile dysfunction, you either hide your head, you laugh, you snickle, whatever you want to call it, because you don't want to face the facts that it's actually a thing and that it is affecting all of these areas of your life. And it's so almost comical to me now because when you and I had a conversation the other day, I was like, "Oh yeah, I had this problem," and you were just like, "Thank you for your authenticity." I'm like, "Well, the most powerful person in the room is one who has no secrets." And if you're willing to have this conversation with your doctor or with your spouse, significant other, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, You're going to start learning to walk the road to freedom. Now, that was again why I created this show. Garrett had asked the question, what does freedom look like? It's a very interesting question when you think about it because it could go anywhere. And today, I really want to focus on the body part of that because freedom in the beginning is just being able to, hey, I have a problem. I, I'm fatigued, I'm tired, I can't get it up. There are a lot of reasons why you should be talking about this. And if you don't, what ultimately happens when you don't? Dr. D?
When you don't, it just gets worse. Every single domain gets more and more painful. Whatever you're experiencing is going to just magnify and get worse.
Mm. So how do we find you? Are we finding you online? Are we finding you in Tallahassee? Like, how do we find you?
Well, the new project coming up, it's going to be in the next week or so, is operationphoenix.com.
Awesome. OperationPhoenix.com. I will put that in my show notes. And again, thank you so much. And listeners, again, this is a conversation that everyone needs to have. It affects every area of your life, every domain, as we kind of talked about. Body is just one piece of a complete holistic person, inside and out. And remember, if you're not having the conversation, there is a cost. There's a cost to doing nothing. Thank you.